Good day, everyone. We thank you for coming through. And today we've got a guest. We are with Coach Mel, and we're just going to be talking about trauma, like how trauma affects our relationships, what is intergenerational trauma, what is generational trauma. We're just going to be digging deeper into it. So, yeah, Coach Mel, I just want you to introduce yourself first before we dig into this topic.
Hi, Coach Tari. Thank you so much for hosting me. My name is Melania Mashandoza, call myself Coach Mel. I'm a certified personal development and personal leadership coach. I have worked on trauma on some of my clients, so I'm happy to be hosting with you tonight.
Yeah, so for me, this topic of trauma is something which I was like this say I would just wanted to dig more deeper into it, understanding like my lineage. I really thank my late auntie who passed away last year in December. You know what she did? She wrote a whole book of our history, like from the fourth
Wow.
generation. She kind of like went and collected all the information from the elders who were still alive. So it's a 70-page book, and I
Wow.
was so like saying wow when I was reading it, like seeing some of the gifts which were passed to us, some of the traumas, obviously, some of the cases, obviously. So just that understanding of where my lineage, like, okay, where did I really came from? What were the gifts my grandfathers, grandmothers had, and all that? It was really like a eye-opening, and sometimes understanding some of the patterns which happens in our lives, and we don't really understand like what's really happening. Like, why is it in this household do you see this? In this household do you see this? That kind of thing. So I
Yes.
think she really did a good job for us, and I just wish everyone, all the grandchildren, can actually read that book and get time just to understand everything. But and what inspired me to invite you? There was this video you did where we were talking about generational trauma, and you actually mentioned like, okay, some of the trauma we can actually work on and we can change, and then some of the trauma we just have to have self-awareness and we have to restart on it. So for me, the other thing which I liked about that video is when you mentioned about self-awareness. But today, before we actually go into that generational trauma, I wanted to talk about the intergenerational trauma, like how did colonialism, slavery, like how did it really impact us? Like we know these things happened like many years ago. We don't really even know what happened. It's just like from reading the books, or maybe hearing from stories from our grandparents or whatever, or from our parents, from what they've heard from their grandparents, but we don't really understand what happened. But with me, with this understanding I was having this, I was also seeing, okay, some of the things which happens to us, it's because of those things which happen in the colonialism. But before we go into that, maybe do you want to go deeper just to explain to us what is generational trauma or intergenerational trauma? What does it really mean? What is it that you're talking about?
Okay. So I'm happy for you that you've got someone that you've got reference to, which makes it easy for you to understand if you have any traumas that you've experienced, even as a child, and they actually surface up as an adult, and you wouldn't think it's important to understand until it actually happens, and then it's like a light bulb moment, and then you're like,
Mm,
huh, so this is what it is. And I'm glad that your aunt did that for you. So it will be easy for you to heal, or maybe some of your relatives or your kids to understand what other traumas that you would experience as a family or as individuals. So for me, I take intergenerational trauma as trauma that is passed from not necessarily your parents, but even from your grandparents,
yes.
because most of our parents, especially in the Black culture, they don't really understand what trauma is, because for them no one really sat down to them to explain to them that this is actually trauma and this is
Mm,
how it affects your life, your relationships, or your finances, and it keeps growing. So in the video that you're talking about, I decided to explain what trauma is, because there is a light version of trauma, of
mhm,
generational trauma, and a deep version of generational trauma. So the light version is quite easy. You can see it. Oh, my dad does this. Oh, this is what I do. Oh no, I don't want that anymore. Then you work on yourself. It's easy. You can keep diluting until it's clear. But there's the deep generational trauma where it's sticks and stones that even if you try to pour water and dilute, it doesn't work, it doesn't go away. Sorry about this. I've
it's
got a
okay.
little one in the house.
Yeah.
So I was saying with deep trauma, it's really difficult to actually understand and to move away from it. And that's mostly the trauma that gets passed on each generation. And for us to actually work on it, sorry.
It's fine. No, it's fine. I don't know
So
about.
for us to actually work on it, we actually have to dig deep. And that's why I'm saying I'm so grateful for your aunt. She did that for you. So it might be easy for you. But for those who don't know how to heal themselves, I'm a coach and I do help with that. But besides being a coach in helping, you can also help yourself. You can also heal yourself, trying to like get to know yourself better, get to know when certain emotions make you feel in certain ways. And that's how you can actually tell, like, oh, this is what my dad used to do, or this is what my grandfather used to do. Because now people openly talk about trauma, and
Mm.
if you ignorant and saying, no, that doesn't affect me, or it's got nothing to do with me, or that's them, they need to heal. Maybe you also have certain things that you are going through as an individual, but you actually can't really pinpoint. And those are the deep, dark traumas that you actually need to heal from. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does make sense, and I kind of resonate with like some people. They will be like acting like they don't have any issues and all that, but it's not really about issues. But sometimes when we're talking about trauma, people think like trauma is maybe when I was involved in an accident, or we
Mm,
think trauma is like all these big things, but we don't really understand some of the emotional traumas which really affect us, and we kind of get stuck in that space because
yeah.
maybe at that age where you were, it was something which was so big, but because we don't get to talk about these things, like I always say, like especially with our African context, sometimes we don't talk about certain issues, especially about this trauma, or even how like how did colonialism like affected us. Like I don't remember any time where I had conversations with my parents, like even the time of war, how did that impact them, how did that affect
Mm,
them. We
mm,
just used to hear some stories like, oh, this happened, like magandanga kazoshika pamba, those kind of
mm,
things, but we never really got deeper into it, like how did that affect them, and even now, like how they're relating with us. Maybe it could be something which had happened there. But now I wanted us to dig deeper. Like, okay, when we're talking about colonialism, this happened like a
mm,
long time ago in Zim when I was doing history. I still remember at school, like we used to laugh like Lo Bengula sold the country because of sugar, right? It was a
yeah.
joke, but we don't really like get to talk deeper of, okay, how did that also like really kind of impact us, the way we behave, the way we do things, the way we make our decisions.
Mm,
How did
mm,
that like really affect us? Because with me, I feel like colonialism really like kind of steals some of our identity,
yes.
especially Zimbabweans. I always say we've got identity crisis. We
Yes.
don't even know what is our African way. Like when there are events like your Heritage Day, African Day, we don't know what to wear. Sometimes we
Yes.
end up like wearing other nations' clothes because that was stolen from us, so we don't really know what is our identity.
Mm.
So I don't know if you want to add more into that. Like, how did that really impact us? As like, especially like if I'm looking back as Zimbabweans, I'm a Zimbabwean, so I can only reference back to being a Zimbabwean.
So for me, colonialism and slavery mostly took away, I would say, okay, so for example, some of it brought poverty.
True.
I'm not saying there wasn't poverty. There's always been. And it's not just Zimbabwe that also experiences poverty. But what I'm trying to say is, okay, let me explain this in my mother language.
Mm,
Pane umwe upfumi hwataiva nahwo
true.
that was taken away.
Mm,
And with that came vanasekuru vedu blaming other people, right?
mm,
So even if they could have healed from it, which wasn't easy, and I'm saying
mm,
it's so easy, but there are certain instances where 1 out of 100 people um, succeed in life and move out of poverty.
true.
But why don't we look at what do they do to move out of poverty?
Mm,
Instead of continue blaming on colonialism, oh, vakazotitora takazotengesa nyika neshuga tikazodii, but they're also successful people vari muzimbabwe. How do they
yes.
do it? And then with that now, we end up living a life to say, I'm struggling anyway. Why bother? Then we
Yes.
don't end up saving. It affects
Mm.
our money emotions.
Yes.
I'm never going to be successful. I might as well just live with what I have.
Mm.
Then we end up making decisions based on whatever happened like 50 years ago or
Mm.
30 or 40 years ago. But why don't we find ways to move from that
Yes.
in the sense that's going to help us not just being successful or being wealthy, but just healing ourselves, healing our traumas. And some of us, we don't even really know what happened. But because my grandfather told us, "Ndanga ndiri mbuya vanga vari chimbwido, ini ndikazodai, tikazotorwa." Yes, it separated families, people died and everything. But for me, how can we stop blaming whatever happened in the past and
Mm.
not to continue like I wouldn't I can explain to myself the history of Zimbabwe, but I wouldn't want her to inherit the traumas of vabereki vangu pavainogara musango or vanasekuru vangu pavainogara musango. I can inenge iri ngano kwaari, right? But
Yes.
inini handidi kurarama a life of struggling or a life of overspending because my grandparents didn't have. Now that I have, I am the it of the family or it of the whole dewa or mashandudzi family. So now I can spend because tavanazvo zvinhu
Mm.
zvataimbotorerwa tavanazvo, you see. So
Yes.
for me, that trauma, if we don't cut it off, we'll still say, mwana wangu anogona kuti inini mai vangu vakakura chiunodzwa kuti she struggled because her parents struggled. So it's
Mm.
been in the family. So yeah, it's okay. Then you end up living an okay life.
Yes.
So that part of that generational trauma is the deep trauma that I was trying to explain. To say there are certain things that we need to cut off
True.
and start all over again. Yes, it happened. It was painful. It's still painful. Nyangwa sekuru wako achitaura, it would sound like it was yesterday.
Mm.
But then how do we heal from it and move forward?
Move forward from it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I really love that part. As well, we actually mentioned like also like this colonialism, it kind of also brought poverty. Because if you get to look, especially in our history of Zimbabwe, like Zimbabwe was really a fertile land. Like if I
Mm.
look back, my grandfather, he was a wealthy man. He had like many cows, many like he had many livestock, like a lot of
Mm.
cattle, lot of
Mm.
and all that. And but with that, he ended up marrying 7 wives. So which means
You
when
see,
he died a poor man.
and you would still blame on colonialism. Vakatitora upumi hwedu, I had to look after all these wives. But then,
Some of the decisions they made, okay,
yeah.
in some facts, okay, it's kind of like broke families, you mentioned that, but we shouldn't like continue dealing from the past, like dwelling in the past, but we also
Mm.
need to say, okay, these are some of the good stuff which it came with, these are some of the
Mm.
best stuff which it came with. And you'd see like from the conversations like our grandparents talk about, or from me reading the history of my family, I would say, okay, like these are some cases and I don't really want them to continue with me. Yes,
Yes.
maybe they might be in my bloodline, but now as I'm self-aware, now I know at least I
Mm.
can do better with this. Like I can actually like do inner work. I always believe like in doing like your meditations and all that, so that sometimes you just understand, but sometimes you really feel like, okay, I think I've got trauma in these certain areas,
Mm.
but the healing part of it is kind of like a struggle. So I think the first goal, like the first thing, like when you're self-aware and you kind of
Mm.
understand, like, okay, I think there's a trauma here. Let me start
Yes.
working on it. And the other thing which I wanted to jump into, you when you mentioned about poverty, like we know colonialism is the one which brought Christianity, especially in
Mm.
most of African countries. It was
Yes.
because of colonialism. Like we always, when we're reading the books, that they came holding the gun on the right, the Bible on the left hand. That's what I still
Mm.
remember from my history class. So with that, when I was looking at that, okay, like okay, when Christianity came, our elders ended up choosing, okay, some of these practices like Rora, we can continue with it. Krovama
Mm.
Tombo, which we can continue with it. Which for me, I always question my mom, like, you guys, you cherry picked, like the things which
Mm.
benefit
What
you,
benefited them? Yeah.
what benefited you, you said it's okay. What doesn't benefit you, like,
No, that's not good.
just like,
It's too
this is not
traditional.
right. is too traditional and all that. So for me, I also feel like that cherry picking, it kind of dilutes our culture. I think we're supposed just to kind of like I always admire the South Africans. Like they still do some of their practices. Like they still like even the way they dress, the way they do their I can't even remember some of their traditions they do, but they kind of still hang on those traditions. But if you like look at us, especially my Zimbabweans, like most of our traditions, we don't even know. With me, I don't even know like what really was happening. I only know for Rora because Rora is like a practice which
The
everyone
thing.
does.
Yeah.
So for me, I also feel like that Christianity, it kind of also diluted some of our culture and adding on to the poverty which you mentioned. Like you find other Bible verses like where they say like the love of money is the root of all evil. What does it really mean? For me, it doesn't really make sense as someone who loves talking about money. Like, okay, me loving money, how does it be the root of evil? Or what I do with that money, or if I was an evil person, obviously, even when I get the money, to make me be a more evil person, not me like actually like loving and embracing the money, because money will give you like that freedom you want, that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, so that part is really important. And I think that's why for some people, I remember there's one very influential person, I can't really say his name. He said, I don't think I want to marry off my child. I would rather let her go and actually give that man the money and the stats that he needs for him to be able to take care of my child.
God, yeah.
For me, that was deep because, you know, instead of that man struggling to look for money just to please a millionaire already,
Mm,
you end up saying, because also when you're marrying, like I always see even on Facebook, like my boyfriend has got this amount, maybe it's got 1,000 rand, and then people left like, "Ah, how is that even enough? If he can't raise Maria Rora, then how is he going to look after you?"
mm,
Already that person saying that is expecting like 10,000 or more, or I don't know whatever figure they're expecting. But that's leaving a dent on someone's pocket for just Rora without
yeah.
even thinking about the future. But these are the choices that were made because people chose certain cultural events to continue and
Mm,
some events being ignored. I don't really know how what happens at Kurowa Makuba or why would people choose Rora and whatnot. But in all fairness, I think when we make like us, our generation, or even generations to come, what do we need to work on in terms of cultural decisions that really affect us? What are the things that can we ignore instead of inheriting them? As some of these things actually, um, already when you're getting into marriage, and your boyfriend then is overcharged,
mm,
and then won't that be a topic of discussion every time you want to raise a point about saving? Like, why would I save when I've already spent so much on you?
for you,
You want
yes.
us to buy a car or a house, but we've spent already so much on you. Those are the things that bring in um, negative emotions, which also affect how you budget or plan as a couple.
Mm,
So for me, I think in terms of marriage or getting married, affect financial. Speak to your person and know what's best. Because
yeah.
at the end of the day, you are starting a new generation.
Mm,
And what stories are you going to tell your children or your grandchildren from that? Some parents do understand, some still demand. But I
God,
feel
yeah.
like if you actually sit down and discuss certain cultural beliefs, because beliefs and values do affect um, how we value money or how we spend our money. So I believe some of these things are not really important. I'm not saying Rora is not important, it is important,
Mm.
but how much is it important? Especially the Rora squad. You want to spend so
Oh,
much on the Rora squad, and then to please people who are going to be staying somewhere else. And I've seen I'm not saying no men, most men are not really bothered by Rora squad.
true. Mm,
And I mean, is it really necessary?
True.
What else can you do with that?
With that.
This is a new culture. This is a new thing that's happening. Aurora Squad.
Mm.
Tatotanga kamwe ka generational trauma can also affect our marriages. And how many marriages last after all these issues when wa mumba wa married? You
Mm.
know, yeah.
And I'm actually glad that I got married before this.
Thank you. Me too.
This whole thing of Flora Squad, because I think I was just gonna be stressed. Because I'm one person who's like, hey, I don't want to spend money just for people to enjoy for one day, and
One
I'll
day
be
and
in
go.
debt for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never. So you find also these things also with like I think also the other thing which I kind of see like how also generational trauma kind of also plays in us. Sometimes we kind of live for other people, like what would
Yes.
people say? So that's why you
Yes.
see also this drive more of this Rora Squad. People, they're not really doing it for themselves. They're doing it to be seen by other people.
Mm,
But it goes back to that question you raised: is it really worth it?
mm.
You see, is it really worth it? For me personally, I think if I had that, if I would had the voice to be saying it when my kids get old, I don't think I would want any Rora for my daughter, honestly, because for me, marriage is just like Kubata needs
What
like
has come? Yes.
just making two families unite. So and so there's nothing why parents should be greedy and say we want to demand this, like you're selling your child. That's
Mm.
why issues like GBV also like are on the rise. But some men, they feel so entitled because they
Yes,
spend
to
so
you
much
because they
money.
paid so much.
Which is not right, which I feel like our parents should kind of understand all that. But for me, I'm so grateful that my parents understood, because I kind of told them that, you know what, this is what my guy has,
Mhm.
and they kind of like worked on his budget. So I think my
Mm.
parents were a bit more rational on that. On that time, I also felt like, okay, there were other relatives who were like, no, you're charging need to what, but my dad stood his feet, and I'm so grateful. Like, he stood his feet and said, no, you know what, this is my daughter, and this is what he told me, that's what they can afford. But at the end of the day, we still need like to stay together. We still need to raise kids. So I think parents should just
Yes.
understand that, because I think sometimes it also comes from that greediness space. Maybe it comes from that generational trauma, and
That they didn't have, or also maybe back then vanasekuru vakapiwa mombe dzakawanda, so they also feel they should inherit the same thing and have kutaridza upfumi hwemhuri, kutaridza kuti wapiwa mombe ngani or wapiwa mari yakawanda sei.
you see, or maybe it also comes from that poverty mentality that I just need
Yeah.
to demand this much, and you'd be surprised like 2 years down the line they're back to zero, because where it's really coming from, their demands, where they're really coming from, it doesn't work. I think that's also the thing of us, if we don't like heal from our traumas, in as much as we make money, or in as much as we try to be in relationships, it won't work, because there's part of us which still like wounded, and it's still like goes and spoil that water we have been trying to clean. So I think if people from today, I think maybe let's just give some last few words from today, what people can take. For me, I think I just want to say, okay, I think you just need to understand, like, okay, in as much colonialism, we say it kind of affected us, we've got some traumas, but let's see, okay, the good stuff we took from it, the bad
Yes.
stuff we need to like to kind of heal from and let it go, because these things happened and they happened before, and just understand our ancestral lineage, just to understand, okay, what are the gifts which have come through, because I also believe our ancestors, they were so gifted. Like my grandmother, she was a midwifery. My I mentioned to you about my grandfather, that he was a wealthy man. So those are some of the things I can take, like, you know what, in my lineage it's so easy to make money because he did it
It's in your
before.
blood.
It's in my bloodline. And you find like even in on my dad's family, most of them, they're entrepreneurs, most of them. So which is something which is in the bloodline. Like, okay, it's so easy for us to be entrepreneurs, to start businesses which can flourish. But what we do, those businesses, that's what matters now, because we don't want to repeat the same thing which my grandfather did. You see, so I think those are some of the things we just need to understand and say, okay, what can you take from that? What you need to be healing from that, and you continue the journey with. I don't know what other last words you want to leave our audience with.
Yeah, I do agree with what you said, but for me, just to add that,
Mm,
find yourself first before you even want to look. In terms of generational trauma, you cannot heal if you don't find yourself, because you need to find the wholeness within you.
mm,
You need to heal you, your inner you, because in as much as you find whatever else happened before your time, but if you don't find yourself, like you said, what are you gifted at? What can you do better about yourself? That way you will be able to heal. And we should also stop blaming other people. We need to find the authentic you for us to stop these generational traumas. Because otherwise, yes, we can talk about it, we can be happy, we can know we had entrepreneurs now, family, bloodline, everything, rich cousins and everything. But who are you as a person and who do you want to be? If you are to stop the generational trauma today, what's the benefit to you and to the generations to come? For me, that's really important because you can't heal what you don't know.
True.
Yeah.
True. I love that what you said, like also finding yourself. I know this book, I can't remember the author, Coming Home to Yourself. So I think also like just remembering who you are in the
Mm.
first place, was I believe all of us, we've got some purposes and just identifying that purpose. But I think that one will dig more deeper into it because it's also another heated topic
Topic.
on its own. On
Yes.
its own. So I
Yes.
think that will be our next one, which we're gonna be recording on and just
Mm.
talking like, okay, when you're on that journey of finding yourself, what is it that you want to do? And that healing journey, what is it that you really want to do? But for today, I think that's all we're here to share
Oh.
today. And stay tuned so that you can see more topics we'll be sharing on this topic of trauma. Bye for
Mm.
now.
Bye for now. Thank you.